Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Perry Hewitt, and I'm the Chief Marketing and Product Officer here at data.org. We act as a platform for partnerships working to build the field of data for social impact, really meaning we're looking at the ways that data and AI can make a difference in the large, complex problems that we all face as a society. And it will surprise absolutely no one in this virtual room and no one in this audience that a particularly challenging and thorny problem is gender. With the support of the Rockefeller Foundation, we've been looking closely at the role of gender data and the role of gender data and social impact. What we're missing data about women is reducing our ability to see the entire picture, and where women are absent from the use and analysis of data. Our Under Over campaign shared underrepresented individuals' overlooked stories to highlight the power and impact of gender diversity in data. This campaign sought to raise awareness of what are the successful ways for women and gender diverse individuals to be represented in data, and to themselves not only be represented in data, but to be actors, to harness the power of data to drive social impact. Through this Under Over work, we provided a gender data course, Gender Data 101, to over 1,000 individuals. We published a content series, and we produced a 4-part video campaign. Before starting this work, we did a sector-wide research exercise to understand the landscape of gender data-focused organizations, data, and resources. And it was in these conversations with the real experts in the field where we heard over and over again about the intersection of gender and the climate crisis. We heard about the disproportionate work caused for women, surprising no one, and the disproportionate risk for women around the world in an era of rapidly advancing climate change. This discovery caused us to take action. We created a gender data and climate playbook, a guide to understanding how climate change affects the lives of different genders around the globe. We are very grateful to Data Género, represented here today, for their partnership and their subject matter leadership on this product. At data.org overall, we seek to provide actionable insights and practical tools. Our angle is implementation. We're trying to advance the use of data and AI to address social and environmental challenges. This playbook aims to empower individuals, communities, policymakers with knowledge and resources to create more equitable and sustainable solutions for a better future. I encourage everyone here to explore this new playbook and let us know what you think. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by a panel of true gender and climate data experts to explore how to close gender data gaps and advance the use of data for and by women. So I'm going to ask our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, your organization, and your mission as it relates to gender. Also, where are you joining from today? Let's start with you, Roberta.
Hi, everybody. My name is Roberta Evangelista. I'm a senior digitalization specialist at BASE Foundation. BASE is a not-for-profit organization based in Switzerland. And what we do is we work to develop innovative business models to drive investments in climate change solutions. Today, I'm joining from Zurich in Switzerland and happy to be here.
Thank you. Chioma?
Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here. My name is Chioma Ome, and I'm the country director for Solar Sister Nigeria. I'm joining from Nigeria. Solar Sister is a women-based organization that trains and supports women to build clean energy businesses in sub-Saharan Africa. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Ivana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ivana. I'm based in Bariloche, Argentina, and I am the director of Data Género. Data Género is a nonprofit organization based in Argentina, but working in Latin America to help produce better gender data in governments and in companies, and also to promote responsible and feminist AI. We are working with data and AI. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And Chioma, I forgot to ask where you're joining from today.
From Nigeria.
Nigeria, great, excellent. So let's turn it over to you, Ivana.
Yes.
Great, thank you. At Data Género, you're building a broad network to monitor the practices and the policies regarding data and gender in Latin America. Use gender as an entry point to all this intersectional work. What was a moment or experience that led you to recognize that gender data and climate are interconnected issues?
That's a great question. I personally have been interested in climate for a long time. As I told you in our interview, that was our first meeting. I started to study biology when I graduated from high school because I wanted to teach about climate and about the environment. And then I decided to switch to education because I thought it was more powerful to have a lot of tools to teach about different things. But climate was always there in the back of my head and in my life because I live in a very green environment. Patagonia is well known for its mountains, and well, we see a lot of the hazards of climate change here. We see a lot of fires in the forests. We see floodings. We see a lot of different issues that affect people differently. So I thought about bringing that to Data Género to my organization, and we also met this young, very passionate woman called Rocio, and she also was interested in the intersection between gender and climate. And then you offered us the possibility to build this amazing playbook. So it all came together like tiny pieces. And at the same time, we applied to be part of a core partner of GIDA, that is the Gender Environment Data Alliance. And now we are part of the steering committee. So we are fully dedicated to the climate and gender intersection now.
Terrific. And I love the idea of feminist AI as well, is that increasingly we think about AI, of course, as data.org, because data is such a critical underpinning, right? Garbage in, garbage out. If you start with the wrong data, you're going to be left out of the next revolution. So that's a really important issue for us as well. I will ask the audience if there are any questions you have. There will be time for audience Q&A at the end. So please pop them into the chat and Emma will be collecting them and distributing them across the panelists. So a second question for you, Ivana. One goal of Data Género is to address the missing data regarding women and the LGBTQIA community in Latin America. And in our Pathways to Impact conversation, some of the statistics and dangers you shared were really striking. Well, what have you learned from this work about missing data, and how can these learnings be effectively implemented to address gender and climate challenges?
Yeah, I think that the best way to see what is missing is to ask questions. If you start to ask questions about gender inequalities and disparities and how climate change can affect different populations, not only women, we can start to see what is missing to measure those inequalities. So we have a lot of indicators. We have the SDGs and we have the sub-indicators inside the SDGs, and there aren't many indicators that intersect gender with climate. So we need to start building those indicators so we can start seeing how we can measure that. So we are a lot of steps behind in this race to tackle inequalities and climate change also. But asking the right questions can lead us to a lot of gaps in the data that we have, and a lot of gaps in the temporality also. We have data that is really old, and we have data that is uncompleted. So there is a great report that Data2X created about this missing data on gender and climate. I will put it in the chat later.
Terrific, thank you. And one thing that I've learned in this research, and I know Chioma, you may touch on this as well later, is how you ask the questions matters too, right? If you want to get the right data and elicit the right answers, a lot of the sort of the metadata, the modality, how you go about collecting it matters. Do you have any examples to share there around gender and data and climate, where the how has has really affected the outcome?
There aren't many data available about gender and climate, like data sets that we can ask questions to. So I think the step we need to make is to create those data sets and to create those data about gender and climate that we can connect, because we don't have that yet. We are really behind on that, especially in Latin America. But we have this guide that we created with Data Género about how to create these questions and how to create these questions. Yeah, I have some of the insights here, if you allow me to share it. No, not the screen, but the things that we want to ask the data.
Mhm.
So first, we need an interdisciplinary and gender-sensitive team that can work with this data, because if we don't have a diverse team to work with the data, it's really hard to get these questions. We need experts on data and experts on the domain that we are trying to achieve. The domain is not gender in general. We have a lot of different aspects. For example, health, economics, education. So we have different aspects, and each aspect have a different expert that we need to bring to the table to ask these questions. We need to map the data that is available and what can we do with that. And also, we need to try to involve and to show the realities of people that are not men or women, also trans people, non-binary, queer. So we need to extract the binary of the data and try to make it more diverse, so we can have better results and better measurements of the inequalities. And then we should ask if that data is sex disaggregated or not, and if it's binary or not, if it's intersectional also, because one of the things we see in climate change, for example, is that climate change affects populations differently regarding disabilities, race, sex. So we have a lot of different ways that people experience these floodings or fires or hurricanes, and what comes after that is different from being a white cis man
Who cleans up literally and figuratively after the
Yeah.
disaster. Yeah, who's doing that work.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you. So finally, I'll turn to the playbook, which we're so excited about. You developed this gender data and climate playbook for us. Can you tell us a little about your journey in creating this terrific resource? As a gender data expert, were there any revelations at the center? You said it was sort of a learning experience as well as a creating experience, which all good writing is. Were there any revelations or aspects of the gender and climate crisis and nexus that surprised you?
Yeah, I think that the part about the financial inclusion was something that I didn't think about, but it's crucial, and it's the key point of how we can help these communities and people that are displaced or affected by climate change, especially women and LGBTQ plus people, financially. That's the whole issue, because when there is money, there are more ways to tackle a really hard climate event. But when there isn't, it's harder, of course. And also how to prevent it and how to educate people on what is going on, and help them make some change in their communities. So financial aid, it's really important there, and that wasn't something I had in mind when I started mapping these inequalities. And for me, it was very important. And there is this CFAR document that was key to think about this intersection. And also, I thought I was going to find a lot more data available, because I am an optimist, and I didn't. So I'm asking everyone, if you have some data that can be connected, like two data sets that can be connected, or information that can be helpful to measure the inequalities affected by climate change, we are welcome to think about how to analyze it and how to show it to the world.
I also wonder how much data is revelatory of climate change where we're just not tracking or looking at it. It's not explicitly connected. I mean, something is obvious perhaps as mobile phone connectivity moving from one region to another, right? Where you're seeing people are displaced and how they're going. But the data we don't think of as climate, maybe data exhaust from other data sets are telling a story about climate that we need time, budget, and resources to take a look at.
And that's why we also need experts that can point us in the right direction on what to think about all these really intricate and complicated issues that are not just straightforward. We have a lot of points that are connecting, and a lot of things that are connecting regarding climate change and also gender inequalities. So we need to have an open mind and think outside of the box of what we usually think about climate and about gender to see these connections.
Terrific. And that speaks to the interdisciplinarity of the people who need to address it. We need statisticians and machine learning people and ethnographers and anthropologists. We need a wide range of people looking at this problem.
And also, yeah, activists and people that are suffering these events and that are living in the territories they have a lot of knowledge, and we need to put them in the discussion. It's really important.
Here, I'll make a plug for our Recode report we did a couple of years ago with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, which really addresses your point, Ivana, which is the communities that, you know, are closest to the work need to be engaged in these conversations because they bring direct knowledge and lived experience that really informs the outcome. Well, great. Thank you so much for your time. And I will pass the mic over to Roberta. Moving from Argentina to Switzerland, we have 3 amazing women on 3 continents today. It's a real privilege. So Roberta, in your work at BASE, which we were so honored to work with you on the Inclusive Growth and Recovery Challenge, and just to see you go from strength to strength since that 2020 event, you know, we're in a tough spot. We have record-breaking temperatures that damage crops, a challenge that's really, you know, exacerbated by the lack of affordable and accessible cooling solutions, particularly for vulnerable groups. You know, the Chilling Prospects 2023 report shows that women are 1.6 times more at risk of men than lacking access to cooling. Can you explain to us how rising temperatures and a lack of cooling solutions disproportionately affects women and girls?
Absolutely. First of all, going back to the point of lack of data, I would like to share my appreciation for Sustainable Energy for All, which is the organization behind the Chilling Prospects. So this is basically a series in which they bring together data that monitor the access to cooling across continents, across genders, and also across areas, so rural areas or urban areas. And with access to cooling, what they focus on are A, thermal comfort, B, everything that relates to food and agricultural production, and 3, the medical aspect, so the aspect related to, for example, vaccine conservation. And out of this report, what comes out for the last year, so 2023, is that there are still more than 1 billion people, so 1.12 billion people that are at high risk in terms of access to cooling. Practically speaking, what does this mean? It means that they have no access to electricity, which also means that they don't have access to refrigeration for food, and also that the vaccines are exposed to high temperature because of this lack of access to cooling. So the situation is quite dramatic, I would say. And out of the report, what comes out is that women are more likely than men to be affected. And the question is really why? This goes back in part to what Ivana said. There is a very important component, which is the one of intersectionality. So the effect of a lack of cooling comes on top on existing disparities that women already have to cope with, as for example, could be the lack of essential services, for example, safe water or sanitation, which affects women in a more severe way than men. It could be, for example, the location where they spend most of their time. So if they live in, you know, very crowded and poorly built homes, this probably has a stronger impact if you think about thermal comfort. And another aspect could be, for example, anything that relates to their working conditions. So we know that women are more likely of working in low-paid jobs, or anyway in jobs in which the conditions are worse. And this means that, for example, in the agricultural sector that I'm the most familiar with, we know that women are more likely to work in the informal sector and also to be more exposed to heat. So all in all, these are 2 aspects that are important. So health and well-being, conditions at the workplace. Another aspect that I think it's also important to mention is more linked to poverty overall and households dynamic. So for example, there was a very interesting report by Efficiency for Access, that reported that women are much less likely than men to own a fan or a refrigerator. And you can imagine what this means in terms of then thermal comfort, but also preservation of fruits and vegetables, for example. So there are really different, many different aspects that come together and that really exacerbate this situation when it comes to high risk of cooling. And here, I'm trying to focus on, the high risk really, so no access to electricity, no access to cooling, but even what is considered medium risk is actually already quite quite dramatic in terms of effects on your everyday life if you don't have access to cooling. And of course, as temperature rises, this is expected to get even worse in the coming years.
Thank you. No, as you were talking, I was thinking also of, the women selling in the markets, that tie of agriculture and commerce, right? So, if you don't have access to cool your wares, not only you have a comfort issue and a safety issue, but you also have a livelihood issue in the heat.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us a little bit, the project, you've worked on many projects, but one of them is your virtual cold chain assistant. Can you please share with us how you've used sex disaggregated data in the design of your virtual cold chain assistant, and how has this gender data enabled greater impact of the tool?
Yeah, sure. So the Your Virtual Cold Chain Assistant, or your VCCA in short, it's an initiative that we launched in 2021 with the support of data.org. And what we do is we basically collaborate with local cooling companies, so cooling companies in different parts of the world. We started with India and Nigeria. What these cooling companies do is they offer solar-powered cold rooms for farmers, where they can just go store whatever produce they want to store, mostly fruits and vegetables, and they just pay per use. And so what we do, our role as BASE, together with our partner organization EMPA, is to support these cooling companies and the farmers, so that on one side they can manage these cold rooms in a more efficient way. And also we support them by developing capacity building material, and also a mobile application that we have developed so that the cold rooms are managed digitally in a more efficient way. Now, when we started this project, it was very important for us to understand better the context. And this is why we have started by interviewing across India and Nigeria, in the locations where we wanted to start this pilot, more than 900 farmers. And we really wanted to understand who are the potential users of these cooling solutions. And out of that, we got really interesting learnings that then we use to develop the project further. And of course, a very strong component was using gender lenses in trying to analyze this data. So practically speaking, what are some of the things that we discovered? One thing that it's very prominent, and it goes back again to questions like, data that might not be directly linked to what you're trying to investigate, but actually have a very strong impact on it, are the fact that we discovered that in the locations where we were surveying these farmers, women were less likely to own a smartphone than men, and also less likely to own any type of phone. Also, they were the ones that they were more likely to have little or no education at all. And this means that when we thought about, developing, for example, the capacity building material or the mobile application, we had to be very intentional about, okay, what do we do to serve such users? And what this resulted to was, first of all, focusing on developing something that is as clear as possible with as little text as possible. So a lot of images, a lot of icons, using also more creative format, as for example, comic strip, as opposed to, long blocks of text. Translating all the material that we have in local languages so that it's more accessible to people who might have less education, and also thinking a bit away or taking a step back from this idea of delivering all the information via smartphone, but rather thinking about how can we empower also the users, so the farmers that don't have a smartphone, for example, by sending them SMS instead of just having smartphone notifications, and also having a support system, so an ecosystem, so that users that don't have any type of phone can still get some of the information that is related by the cold room operator, so the persons that are physically present at the cold room. Another important aspect is more linked to the accessibility. So are these cold rooms where we want to pilot actually accessible? This means both in a physical and in a cultural sense. And practically speaking, this means, are women willing to actually use these cold rooms? Do they see it as something that feels safe and useful for them? And here we had a few learnings from the survey. One is that women are much more likely to actually use the cold rooms if the cold room operator is a woman. And this is an aspect that some of the companies, the cooling companies we're partnering with, are really focusing on. So for example, Cold Apps, our partner in Nigeria, they only hire female cold room operator. And this means that in terms of impact, they are able every year to hire more than 100 women in the community to operate this cold room, and also to be the link between the communities, so the farmers and the small traders, and this idea of sort of bringing cooling to a wider audience. So these are definitely important things that we learned. So the accessibility, and this also means in terms of the material that we develop, like how do we make sure that women are represented, that they don't feel cooling, which is a technology that it's relatively new in some of these contexts. How can we make sure that they don't feel it's something that it's very far away from, what they could learn or what they could use? So making sure that in all the representation and the material that we have, women are represented as main characters and really in being present in all parts of the chain, if you want, or all parts of the operation. That's something that we realized was important for the purposes of developing a project that's then inclusive.
I love the way you said that, accessibility in terms of culture, because I feel like so often we think of accessibility as sort of checking a number of boxes around whether it's web font size or the design of a building, versus how do people feel when they're in the space? Do they feel welcome? Are they able to get there? Are there legitimate safety or cultural safety concerns we need to take into account? So that's a great way to, thanks for sharing how the gender disaggregated data informed your build. Finally, how is BASE empowering and equipping women to lead data-driven climate solutions? I hear you around the challenges of educational access and attainment, right? That's going to be a barrier in many cases. But are there other examples of ways, for example, by empowering women to run the cold chain, the cold hub storage facilities, or to employ women as coders as you begin to expand the app, or as user research designers? Have there been ways that you've found that you can empower women to lead data-driven climate solutions?
Yeah, so one thing that I think it's a good example of this is the fact that still through the survey, one thing that we understood is that especially in the Indian setting, women are very involved in agriculture, but they're not very much present when it comes to the commercialization of their crops, which means that they might see the cold room as something that is distant from them, because they are not the one that are trading or that is selling the produce that they are actually harvesting. So to overcome this issue and still enable them to use the cold room, some of our partners, and here I'm thinking mostly about Coalfresh, which is one of our Indian partners that operates in the state of Odisha in India. What they do is they let women self-help groups operate these cold rooms. And not only they are trained on operating these cold rooms, but they're also trained on how to run a small business around the cold room. So what this means is, for example, like supporting the farmers with commercializing the crop. So they aggregate the produce that is stored in the cold rooms, and they take the responsibility of selling it and delivering it to, for example, locations or like businesses that are close to the cold room itself. And so what this means is that not only you think about the number of jobs that can be created by operating the cold room itself, but there is a larger ecosystem that gets created around cooling that enables even more women to feel empowered and to feel to participate to this movement.
That is such a great example. One of the things I really like about it is you've taken an existing cultural structure of the self-help groups. And again, I'll plug our data.org/gender videos, because one of them talks exactly about that, about the power of self-help groups in the Indian context too. In this case, it was about career and work empowerment to leave the home. But in your context, it's how do we take this existing cultural structure and norm and apply it to issues of climate to empower women?
Yes, exactly. And I think more, at a higher level, more in terms of the work that we do at BASE, what we try to do overall is we ourselves are a very diverse team, which I think is very important. Then when we think about designing solutions that look at all genders in a curious and sort of interested way. And another thing that we are trying to actively pursue is really trying to work with partners that also themselves have a strong interest and a strong track record of empowering women to really lead climate solutions from different angles. So that's something that we take a lot of care in ensuring that this is actually the case, and I think it's showing itself as something that has strong impact and good results across different projects that we manage.
And as a lead data scientist yourself, you lead by example. Great. Thank you so much, Roberta. I'll pass the mic to Chioma, please. Hi, Chioma. I'd love to continue this thread about empowering and equipping women to lead climate-driven, data-driven climate solutions. Can you share a little bit about how you're doing this at Solar Sister?
Yeah, I'm always delighted to talk about the work we do in the nexus of climate change and gender. And so over the last 10 years and more, we have stayed true to our mission of empowering women to enable clean energy access in last mile communities. And the outcome in terms of the number of solar-powered households and increased income levels of women entrepreneurs is a testament to this. We currently have over 10,000 women entrepreneurs who have become agents of energy access in communities in the 3 countries where we operate. Our model is centered on deploying a market-based approach to train and support women in sub-Saharan Africa to build clean energy businesses. In these businesses, our women entrepreneurs use a sales model to distribute solar lamps and clean cook stoves from household to household, community to community. So we literally meet women where they are. We are very data-driven in what we do. And what we find, is that when women discuss about energy, they don't discuss in terms of kilowatts and PVs. They discuss it in terms of how energy improves their lives or disrupts their lives due to its availability or unavailability. So in the work we do, we are very last mile driven, and we define context of unserved communities by geographical disparities, off-grid communities, or low resource settings. What we have found is women are powerful energy marines and marketers. They hold the key to addressing these distribution gaps that ensure modern energy solutions reach each household and get into each community. So our model is very transformative, it's very innovative, and we have gone beyond proving the concept, that women are strong drivers and enablers to closing the energy gap and even making communities more climate resilient. So for us, working with women to drive, climate solutions has proved very, very sustainable and very beneficial, and even created a multiplier effect or impact in what we expected to achieve when we started out an organization to enable energy access and at the same time increase the income capacity of women to engage in any income generating activity. So we're improving livelihoods of women, of households, and at the same time, enabling energy access to communities.
That's great. And women at the front lines in the negative and the positive context. In the negative context, they're facing these challenges. In the positive, sounds like it's a reachable audience for you that is ready to affect change. So we learned that in countries across Africa, more than 600 million people have no access to electricity, and 700 million rely on harmful fuels. And women, primarily responsible for cooking in many contexts, bear the burden of this energy poverty and the harmful effects. How has Solar Sister used gender data, finding what women are doing, where they're doing it, how they're doing it, to change the narrative and to put women at the frontier of solar energy? How does data inform your work?
Yeah, so I would say we had an early start in understanding that nexus of gender and climate and the several inequalities and disparities that exist in these 2 concepts. And the work what we do is, is rooted in the lessons we have learned over 10 years, as well as the key trends, the gap and of the intersection of energy access, where to place gender, why should we focus on women empowerment in energy access? What's the relationship? The core of our work is data-driven. So we integrate gender-lens data frameworks end-to-end in what we do. We continue to build partnerships with data-focal organizations, just like data.org. We integrate data by centering a lean data quality data system that prioritizes quality over quantity of indicators. Our data sets are one that we we have generated from the work we do and improved upon, through the years of our work. When we generate our lean quality data system, we ensure that we don't pass on the huge surveying burdens to our women entrepreneurs. So we meet our first data respondents, who are our community gatekeepers and entrepreneurs where they are. Let's not forget that one of the barriers to closing the gender gap in climate change, even in gender data gap, is people even understanding what climate change is. You go to communities, you want to get some data, and you say climate change, and they are wondering, what is that? But by the time you describe how they have not been able to see rain, in the usual weather, what are the changes that have taken place in their weather, they are able to easily resonate. So what we do is to ensure that we meet our women entrepreneurs and first data respondents where they are by communicating in their language, using words that they can easily resonate, adapting it to the context that they would understand, and taking away, some of those technical jargons, but still finding ways to communicate it in such a way that they understand that we need the data for their own good. And so there is a sense of belonging, from respondents and from even our women entrepreneurs. We have also built a culture of evidence-based decision-making, and this guides our data-driven approaches, our pilots, and continually test our viability, the viability of our model and our innovation when we want to scale to new communities or even new contexts. Right. We are also leveraging on the local knowledge of our women entrepreneurs and, combining it with data science so that we stay informed about unserved communities and even consumer markets. So these are some of the ways we have integrated data in what we do.
Thank you. That was great. And it does recall both Ivana's comments about how you collect the data and the Roberta's comments about educational attainment and making sure that information is delivered in the right way when you speak about the jargon that pervades so much in the sector. So I love that you're all taking a local language, plain English, know your audience approach to the work that you do. Otherwise, your data can be bad and your decisions can be poor. That's great. So today, you guys are full of great numbers. Solar Sister Week's like 10,441 entrepreneurs, and you're still counting. Yeah. What's the power of data storytelling in expanding not only the market, explaining to women why they should engage in these clean energy behaviors, but also the bench of the women entrepreneurs? How does the big picture data story get told by Solar Sister in different contexts?
Our data story has enabled us to organically build a community of trust with our women entrepreneurs and even our partners. We're able to scale to new communities and reach more women because we first have data to present, right? We took data serious from the onset. And so we have data to present, we have data to be able to create and analyze the stories that we want to tell. So we use our data to engage prospective communities and prospective women. When we're entering new communities and we are engaging multiple stakeholders in communities, we always present our data, and some of our data include how our work is enabling energy access and empowering women in other communities, other countries, other states, and people want to be part of this big story, this big change. So when we meet prospective women, we share stories of how they're part of something big using data to let them know how women like them are already empowered across our 3 countries, and everyone wants to be part of a good story. We use data to help our women entrepreneurs see the big business opportunity in the energy gap in their communities and beyond. So they see the business opportunity because we tell them, okay, in your community, we find that X number of houses lack access to energy. So imagine what it would be for you to provide, some form of energy to their households. Imagine the amount of money you will be making and the business you will be making, the business that is in for you as an entrepreneur. We're able to do all of this because we have disaggregated data. So for us, our data stories help us engage more, helps us connect more with the communities and with our women entrepreneurs. It helps us simplify complex data sets. It's very easy when data is presented to think that when you say 5 out of 10 women or 5 out of 10 as an indicator, people are more likely to think that the 5 is out there and the 10 is also out there. But we're able to use our data to help communities and women understand that climate issues is home, is close here, is home. So our data, helps us break down those complex data sets when it comes to climate, when it comes to gender contribution and how they can be part of this change. It helps us just create the right context to data, adapting it to their communities, localizing it to what they know and what resonates with them. The last time their river was high and now it is low, no reason. So we're able to help them use data to see the scientific reason why all of these climate changes are happening. Data also, our data storytelling helps us to inspire action by both our workforce and our entrepreneurs. The first elements we do when we onboard new staff at Solar Sister is to share our story. We have a chicken story that inspires the work we do. So just sharing our story on how we are champions of, gender inclusion in climate change helps even the workforce and even our women entrepreneurs to become activists of climate change solutions, because we're able to see, we're able to show and tell the big impact picture that we have painted with our data. So our data is our power.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And what strikes me, and you were also, of course, an Inclusive Growth and Recovery Challenge winner, is when you look about it, you've inculcated so much pride by giving that local empowerment. Here's what you can do quantitatively, data. You can see the, move up and to the right against this problem, but also the global narrative of here you can be part of it. When I think of the climate issues, and so many of the stark ones are faced, in sub-Saharan Africa, and they're so immediate. The reaction can be just anxiety. Like, what can I possibly do? And by adding that local empowerment angle, you've really used data to bring along the workforce. Great. I'll just ask all our panelists to rejoin now, so we can take a few audience questions that have come in. And if I may, we're missing Roberta. There we go. If I can take the moderator's privilege and lead off with the first question for you all. And again, you all are experts in the field. We had the privilege to interview many more in our research phase of this project. And, I'm in a learning mode. One of the things that really shocked me personally when looking at the tie between gender, climate, was the incredible role of gender-based violence. I had not put those dots together, but in every research you read, you see that the additional stress posed by climate has caused a significant uptick and in gender-based violence, regardless of the context. So let's try to end with some hope here. Do you have any particular programs or progress against what is apparently a really troubling and worsening issue in the context of climate change? And I'll start with you, perhaps, Ivana, because I know you've done a lot of research in that area.
Yeah, what we are trying to do from our organization is to bring this issue to the table when we're speaking with governments in crisis management, to really look at the population that are really marginalized and how it works, that are women and really poor communities. So they should have an extra budget and assigned to help them and accompany them with, in particular in a climate change crisis. So they can put them in safe homes and they can be removed from the household when there is a person that is violent to them. And also empower the organizations that are working with gender-based violence so they can have an extra set of eyes when this crisis occur. So I don't know, here in Argentina, we don't have organizations specifically linked with the two, like people dealing with gender-based violence in climate crisis, but we can empower the other organizations that are working in the two areas to be more sensitive about these issues. So that's what we are doing.
What I saw was increasingly climate, people focused on climate crisis and how to deal with it. We're introducing a strand to deal with gender-based violence as part of the remediation. One of the things you have to think about, and it sounds like you've really raised the profile of that conversation. Anyone have anything else to add on this? Great. No, it's a persistent and worsening issue. And I think the conditions of climate change in which you're adding more work, fewer resources, overcrowding, take something we know to be pernicious and really accelerate it. So I'm grateful to the people doing great work here. Now, a question from the audience is coming for Chioma. Knowing the systemic gaps in gender data, what's Solar Citra's approach to reaching women in last mile contexts? I think you answered some of this, but perhaps you could go a little bit deeper, saying that sometimes it's hard to get the gender data. How are you really reaching these women?
At first, we define last mile communities by three interconnected factors. Communities that have experiencing lack of access to the grid power, underserved or unserved, low and income seasonal communities, and remote or isolated geographies. So our approach is to focus on these context communities and ensure that we are able to, our model is designed in such a way that it is adaptable to each community, in this context. So what we do is to engage our women, when we go into communities, we engage the women entrepreneurs, engage the community themselves to become contributors, to the different, to our model and to the impact that we seek to create to ensure that it is sustainable. Our model is sustainable and it's viable in these communities.
Thank you so much. I hope that's helpful. So Roberta, perhaps this one is for you. Another question has come in talking about sharing examples from your work of working together with local governments to generate data on the gender climate nexus. I know you're active in India and Nigeria, and I imagine government partnerships are key to success in both contexts. How have you worked with governments to start to come up with that data to understand gender and climate better?
I think honestly that there is much more than we can do compared to what we are currently doing. I think like showing results from our surveys, for example, it's something that it's very important to show that indeed there are differences, a bit like Shoma is saying, like once you have the data, you can really show what comes with it. And this is something that it's for many a learning experience, and that's something that you cannot ignore once it's visible, right? So once you make this visible, then everybody recognizes the need of actually looking at these questions, especially when it goes into scalability, right? How do we, we have done some pilots, they work well, they reduce the post-harvest losses, they increase the revenue of the farmers, but then how can we bring it at another level? And for that, definitely governmental support is important, but it's also very important that before we jump into just, installing 100 more cold rooms, so we understand where is the need where are those rooms needed the most. And for that, collecting data, I think it's really crucial, and collecting data with this type of eyes and with this type of lenses is something that that we always have to bring forward and be intentional about.
That's great, thank you. I know we got another question about the role of community in generating data, and I referenced the Recode report and lived experience, but I don't know if Vanna, you had any other context to add on ways that Data Genero has reached out to specific communities, I think particularly of communities that may be harder to identify around gender, and how you've engaged them in the data creation or collection process.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that that it's crucial to have the communities involved because we are trying to anticipate or predict their needs without sometimes not us, but governments are trying to predict their needs. Where should they put specific money for specific policy, and they are not going back to the communities to see what's really going on. Nowadays, we don't have that luck with our government in Argentina because like gender perspective is banned from government. So we are having a really hard time going back and forth with the communities and the government because they are not listening. So what we are doing are demonstrations and like publicly saying what is wrong, denouncing what is wrong, because the president says there aren't any gender inequalities in our society. So we are having a hard time with that. So now all our efforts are being redirected. We are not being the nexus anymore between government and communities because of the change of the government.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And it sounds like you're really empowering the communities to take action, which is great. So another question about how do you think that success stories on climate change can impact you bringing change to other communities across the globe? I know, Roberta, you work in two contexts. I believe Solar Citra is in Tanzania, Nigeria, and Kenya. What mythologies or sort of stories of self can be told to show communities the living stories of change. Like, what are there stories that, what role does storytelling play? And are there specific stories that you tell that you find inspire others?
I mean, one of the major impacts of our work is, empowering women to make, climate friendly decisions, right? So when a woman is empowered, then she can make the right decision, that creates a behavioral change in her household. Then she communicates it to her community, to the next household and to the next household. And this is visibly seen, so I would say that one of the things we're doing, in telling our stories is doing our work and pragmatically doing it from community to communities, developing, designing what our KPIs are, and defining those indicators that show at the end of the day that we have reach the outcome that we set to reach at the beginning of a period, and sharing those stories when we go into these communities, and we were able to support the women entrepreneurs. Today it's over 10,000 women. We started with 500, and then we scale woman by woman, network of women by network of women. So when we put women in clusters, which is one of our models too, when we recruit women, we put them in clusters, and through those clusters, they're able to get the peer-to-peer support, and it has become a strong, powerful method that we use to, will I say, transform and scale the impact of our work. So the women become core drivers, and then it's an organic change, transformative change that we have.
Right, that's wonderful. I think they're showing how those incremental changes add up big. Seems to be a story. If you go to the impact stories section of the data.org website, that's sort of what we try to do, is tell the stories of, don't let this climate crisis cause paralysis, particularly around the gender lens. Let's let it cause action and see ways and showcase ways that incremental change is adding up to big results. So finally, just keep it brief. We're looking for everyone to provide a short tweet-sized statement. What's one thing that gives you hope at the intersection of gender data and the climate crisis? We know there are many challenges out there, governmental, societal, just practical, but is there anything that gives you hope around this intersection? I'll start with you, Roberta.
Yeah, I would say that despite difficulties in collecting gender data and the lack of gender data still to date, I do see that there is more and more interest around the topic, and that there are more and more decisions that need to take into account this perspective. And this makes me hopeful because it allows us to never stop or never forget about the importance of this topic for whatever project we're trying to implement.
That's great. Thank you, Ivana.
Yeah, I agree with Roberta, and also putting these issues into the spotlight means that governments and companies can't look the other side, but also highlighting the work that women environmental defenders are doing in their territories, because there are a lot of women and LGBTQ plus people working in the territories to protect the environment. And I think that's also really important to highlight, and it gives me hope because they are doing a lot of great things.
Thank you. And I think recognition of those individual stories as well as the collective impact is really important, because people need something to hang on to. And if you thought you were going to escape this, Ivana, I am going to mention that you were featured in Vanity Fair as one of the big change makers. And I do think that kind of public recognition, which is not something I would associate you with seeking, is vitally, vitally important for people to say, oh, she's doing that. What can I do? And that's why I'm so glad you're featured in it, and that kind of featuring matters. And finally, the last word to Chioma, what gives you hope? What's your tweet of hope for us?
Yeah, I would say mine is just increase deliberate focus to provide enterprise support and scale ongoing intervention of actors in in working in the intersect of gender and climate, there is more participation, by the government, non-government, state actors and state actors. There is increased, lesser silos of actors, and coming together to collaborate more, and increased number of, women engaged on the design side. I think we're having more women participation on the design side and not just as beneficiaries of these interventions. That gives me hope.
From Ivana's point of visibility to your point of collaboration and women's empowerment in these conversations. And, I think that's something we see across our work at data.org, that bringing those communities together, the academic community, the philanthropic community, government, and social impact organizations, is where the power will lie. These large problems around gender and climate, or other big challenges we face today in the world, are not solvable by one sector alone, and only this kind of collaboration and cross-platform conversation can move us forward. I want to thank all of you for being with us today. We're grateful to have so many leaders in gender, in the gender and climate space. Some of those are named and referenced in the playbook, including Data 2X. So thank you to all the leaders who inspired this work. We hope that you will take some of the ideas and insights from this wonderful panel forward. And finally, I'll close with mentioning we will be having a conference on June 6th in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the Accelerate Conference. You can find out more information at data.org/accelerate. Again, thank you and have a wonderful day.